A wife agreed to sleep with her husband's partners to get a coveted penthouse. The outcome of the story shocked many. "Well, that's a very interesting offer," I said, "but I'm afraid this job isn't for me." Tim Burton was clearly disappointed with my decision. I realized that I would have to accept his displeasure. "It doesn't make me happy, Christopher," he said. "So far, everyone I've offered a partnership to has agreed." "I apologize for that," I replied. "Of course, making you happy is one of the main goals of my life." "It should be," he said. "Your future promotion depends on it. Several of our senior partners want you to move up in this firm." "That's good to hear," I said, "but I don't really have much ambition. I'm comfortable being an associate." "And how does your wife feel about that?" he asked. "Does she know what opportunities you'll have? What advantages you'll gain by becoming a junior partner and then a full partner?" "I have no idea," I said. "I've never discussed it with her. She has little interest in my work." "Is she interested in a penthouse in a building in Dover?" he continued, "or the possibility of you making big six-figure sums?" "I'm not sure," I said. "She's never complained about my current income or our address. Why don't you discuss it with her this weekend? I'm sure you'll see the situation differently when you discuss the compensation." I agreed to talk to my wife, and he left, leaving me alone. I finished the case I was working on and rested for the rest of the day. Later, I played golf with my high school soccer coach and had a nice dinner with my father-in-law. We discussed my business, and he gave me a big hug as we said goodbye. Susan was due back late in the afternoon, so I headed to the gym for a couple hours. When I got home and showered, it was time to pick her up from the airport. Her flight was delayed, so I sat at the bar drinking a beer and watching the arrival time. When the screen showed that her flight had arrived, I went to the gate. She wasn't alone when she got off the plane. She's never alone. Some guy in a uniform followed, trying to talk to her. She paid him no attention. "Well, that's quite an interesting proposition," I said, "but I'm afraid this job isn't for me." Tim Burton was clearly disappointed with my decision. I realized that I would have to accept his displeasure. "It doesn't make me happy, Christopher," he said. "So far, everyone I've offered partnership to has agreed." "I apologize for that," I replied. "Of course, making you happy is one of the main goals of my life." "It should be," he said. "Your future promotion depends on it. Several of our senior partners want you to move up in this firm." "That's good to hear," I said, "but I don't really have much ambition. I'm comfortable being an associate." "And how does your wife feel about that?" he asked. "Does she know what opportunities you'll have? What advantages you'll gain by becoming a junior partner and then a full partner?" "I have no idea," I said. "I've never discussed it with her. She has little interest in my work." "Is she interested in a penthouse in a building in Dover?" he continued, "or the possibility of you making big six-figure sums?" "I'm not sure," I said. "She's never complained about my current income or our address." "Why don't you discuss it with her this weekend?" he suggested. "I'm sure you'll see the situation differently when you discuss the compensation package we're offering." I agreed to talk to my wife, and he left, leaving me alone. I finished the case I was working on and rested for the rest of the day. Later, I played golf with my high school soccer coach and had a nice dinner with my father-in-law. We discussed my business, and he gave me a big hug as we said goodbye. Susan was due back late in the afternoon, so I headed to the gym for a couple hours. When I got home and showered, it was time to pick her up from the airport. Her flight was delayed, so I sat at the bar drinking a beer and watching the arrival time. When the screen showed that her flight had arrived, I went to the gate. She wasn't alone when she got off the plane. She's never alone. Some guy in a uniform followed, trying to talk to her. She paid him no attention. "Did you miss me?" she asked. "Every second," I replied. "Hey, Susan, what do you think about the penthouse in the building in Dover?" "I don't know," she said. "I mean, it's an old building. Which way does it face?" I hesitated. "I don't know exactly. They haven't said yet. Besides, I can make big six-figure sums." She muttered. "Is that what you want?" "No, not really," I said. "I was offered a junior partnership at Abbott and Rems. They felt I should discuss it with you." "Well, congratulations," she said. "Who do I need to sleep with?" "Everyone, I think," I replied. "The senior partners are very interested in promoting me. In fact, I think they're more interested in you than they are in me." her amazing body pressed against mine. "Well, no problem then," she said. "I need to let them know what you think about the apartment and the huge checks." I said, "I'm more interested in the other stuff," she said, giggling slightly. The giggle was cute but inappropriate. I shuddered. "I'm not really into groping 60-year-old men," I said, nibbling on one of the impressive bumps on her chest. "I don't care much for men at all, regardless of their age. If it's all the same, I'd rather touch these pretty things." She giggled again and slapped my hand. "Don't touch it until I say so." On Monday, one of the senior partners called me into his office. Richie Darwin was a handsome older gentleman with iron gray hair and a deep aquitaine. "Christopher, come in and sit down," he said, shaking my hand with a smile. "Burton says he's made you an offer. He's shone like a beacon. Congratulations. You've worked hard and you deserve it." "Well, I haven't accepted his offer yet. Thanks for the congratulations, but they're a little premature," I said, deciding to mention it. "He said you were going to discuss it with your wife," he said. "How did it go?" "So, as she seems to have given the matter careful thought," I replied. "She asked which way the apartment faces." He rubbed his hands together happily. "Oh, it'll have a view of the river," he said. "I'm sure she'll love it. Did she say anything else?" He patted his crotch meaningfully. "Well, I happen to be pretty well endowed myself," he smirked. "Damn, Christopher, this is going better than I even hoped. Your wife is one of the sexiest women on the planet. I know we can work this out in a way that makes everyone happy." I nodded. "Of course. Keeping everyone happy has always been my top priority," I said. "Good man," he said approvingly. "You know that your promotion and continued employment at Abbott and Rams depends on keeping us happy. You got your priorities straight, Christopher. Tell me, is your wife as good as she seems?" "Even better," I said. "She's always made me happy." "I bet she has," he grinned again. "What is she like?" "Everything," I answered. "She'll be happy." "Oh, she will," he promised. "She's going to go to the Christmas party with you, isn't she?" "It'll mean a lot to the people in charge of voting on adding you as a partner." "I'm sure she'll love it," I said. "Susan loves parties." He'd let me go back to the office, and Tim Burton took me out to lunch. He wanted me to sign some papers, including the apartment lease, but I said I wanted Susan to look at the papers and the apartment first. "She's very picky about apartments," I explained. "She won't like it if I sign a lease without consulting her." He was sympathetic and gave me the key. I took the day off and played a round of golf. Susan called me on my cell phone when I was on the 10th hole, and we arranged to meet for dinner. The parking attendant took the keys from me and looked at me with surprise. Apparently, he wasn't used to cars like mine. I hoped he wouldn't scratch it. Susan was waiting for me at the bar. There were 2 guys sitting around her and 2 others hovering around her like vultures. She jumped up when she saw me and led the way to our table, leaving her companions as dejected. When the waiter brought us our food, we started talking about our days. Susan thought she was almost done with her case. "I hope you can finish it by Christmas," I said. "We've been invited to the office Christmas party. All the big shots are really hoping we'll come." She perked up like a puppy. "You know I love parties, baby," she said. "I hope you said yes." "I wanted to ask you first," I said. "I didn't know if you were ready." "I think it would be perfect," she said. I mentioned that I had a key to the apartment and offered to go see it, but she barely let me finish my food. I wanted a slice of cheesecake and a cup of coffee, but she was impatiently tapping her fingernails on the table and looking at me so fiercely that I could hardly enjoy my dessert. Plus, her impatience caused me to scald my tongue slightly with a hot coffee. We pulled up to a building and dove her and the doorman let us inside. I told him we had a key and wanted to look around the apartment to see if it was right for us. He was a little snooty and mentioned that all the apartments in the building were first class. Susan noticed a scuff on one of his shoes. "Better put some polish on it," she said. "Antique shoes like that must be hard to find." His face reddened and he hurried away, probably to attend to his shoes. "You're a mean girl, babe," I teased her when the doorman was out of sight. She laughed and hugged my arm. We entered the elevator, and the key went to the nest on the penthouse level. The elevator ride seemed instantaneous, but actually lasted longer. Susan pounced on me, and kissing a woman like that always makes time fly by. She was already lowering her skirt when the elevator stopped. We walked down the hallway and into the apartment. The spacious rooms and glass walls overlooking the river, as promised, made for a stunning view. Susan looked around her and I went the other way. We met in the kitchen and she tapped her heel on the floor. "Laminate," she said. "Can you believe it? It looks awful." "I heard you can throw a bowling ball on it and it won't get damaged," I said, trying to find a positive. She threw me a funny look. "Why would we throw a bowling ball in the kitchen?" Then the corners of her mouth lifted and I realized what was about to happen. "Do you want to try out the bed?" she asked. "Actually, I'm not that tired," I said. "I just had a cup of coffee. My tongue still hurts." "Oh, poor baby. I have something for that," she said. She dragged me into the bedroom and proceeded to treat my tongue. "The bed squeaks," she remarked as we rode the elevator downstairs. The snooty doorman was at his post again, but this time we didn't exchange pleasantries. Susan chatted nonstop all the way home, and after a nightcap of coffee, we went to bed. The next morning she got up early and made coffee. I took a cup, deciding to take my time, even though I had enjoyed the previous day, and asked her about the apartment. "Yes, sign the lease," she said. "I'll make sure it can be sublet." I went to work, and before lunch, Burton called me in. "What do you and your wife think of the apartment?" he asked. "She seemed to like it," I said. The view of the river was very nice. "Maybe when they clear the river of fish, it'll be a nice place to walk." He didn't seem to have an answer for that. "Well, tell her to dress well for the Christmas party," he said. "She hasn't been to one before, and I'm sure all the senior partners are looking forward to seeing her. You know, Christopher, a lot of the partners have very attractive wives, too. Would you like to see some pictures? One of the advantages of being a partner, you know." He winked at me. I'd always loved looking at pictures of attractive women, ever since I'd found my dad's stash of Playboys in the garage as a kid. "Sure, I'll look at them," I said. "I'll email you the file," he said. "Don't look at them when you have someone with you. We're very careful about that." "Well, that's good," I said. "Are there any pictures of Susan in there by any chance?" "No, not yet," he said. "Would you like pictures?" "We could do them at the Christmas party." "Yeah, I think I'd like that," I told him. "You're doing the right thing for your career," he assured me. "With the economic downturn, it's not a good time to be looking for a new position." "Yeah, I know," I said. "There are a lot of people out of work. I'm very grateful to have a position." "Good man," he said. "It's great to have promising people like you around, who have a head on their shoulders." I walked back to my desk, my thoughts preoccupied with his words. I didn't have a client that day, so I pulled up the images from the file Burton had sent me. They were quite explicit. I didn't realize the men of the firm had such attractive wives. Richard Thomas's wife was absolutely stunning. She was a gorgeous redhead. I always loved Titian's hair. Mitchell Jenkins' wife was just gorgeous. Talk about brown sugar. Those little nipples looked like Hershey's Kisses, and her ass was awesome. I wondered if Susan would mind if I took some time to get to know these gorgeous ladies better. I tagged 2 of the photos and sent her the file. In the note I wrote, "Hey babe, I was just invited to check out the merchandise. I thought, while you were having fun at the Christmas party, would you mind if I took one of these lovelies for a spin?" Just doing it unannounced would have been risky. Susan could get seriously pissed off if I snuck up on her with such a suggestion. I waited for a response for 30 minutes, but never got anything. Hopefully that was a good sign. Then the letter came. "Why are you sending me women's pictures? Do you think I'm a lesbian? I guess I'll have to prove I'm not when I get home." I poked my head out the door and looked around. No one seemed to be heading in my direction, so I went back into my office, closed the door, and pulled out my phone. I unzipped the zipper on my pants and pulled it out. The little guy was already half stressed from his attempts to salute the gorgeous redhead and the beautiful Mrs. Jenkins, so a couple of swats brought him to full strength. I took a couple pictures and sent them to Susan. It took about 2 minutes before I got a reply. "Wow, it's so beautiful. How big do you think he is? There's no telling how big it is. Don't you have a banana or something for scale?" I smiled to myself. She didn't seem to recognize the little soldier. "I think he's about 10 inches, I replied. "Sorry, I don't have any bananas, just a stapler. I don't think anyone would let me approach their tools with such a handy object." "Damn," she replied. "I'll have to measure it when I get home. Try to find a ruler. Damn, she sure is no slouch. I wondered where she got that confidence from. I looked at the pictures again. Maybe she recognized the white boxers with the black bunnies from Playboy. She'd bought them for me last year in Arizona. I'd almost forgotten about it. I wondered if Richie Darwin would object to placing her wealth next to the stapler. I picked up the stapler and headed for his office. On the way, however, I changed my mind. Maybe Susan would just take my word for it. If not, she might approach Richie herself at the party, and if he turned out to be a fraud, she'd find someone else. After all, among the 7, there's always at least one who's better. When I got home, she wasn't there, so I started dragging myself around the house, hiding every ruler I could find. She burst into the house just after 5, threw her briefcase on the couch, and grabbed my arm. "I spent a lot of time outside today," she said. "I'm covered in sweat. Let's go take a shower." The shower led to other activities. I was safe. Tomorrow she would probably forget all about it. It was Saturday morning. We showered again. She had to stop by work for an hour. I asked what was so important, and she said she needed to clear things out and meet a bunch of people. I sat down at the computer and looked through my collection of pictures of attractive women. Wow, that redhead was hot. It occurred to me that it was worth reminding Susan that I'd like a repeat of last night. After all, she hadn't said no last night, so I was optimistic. My optimism turned out to be wasted. "Look at that hottie," she said when she came back. We were looking at the pictures. "Well, if you can recognize the boxers from Playboy." "I can," I stammered. Damn. Now I reminded her about the measurement, but she didn't seem to notice it. Wow, that was close. "When do you think we can get the paperwork for the new apartment and the big checks?" she asked. I realized she was trying to distract me from the redheaded hottie. She has a jealous streak a mile wide. I figured out her little plan. "I wonder what you'll look like after the Christmas party." I pondered. "Well, probably just like her," she said. "Jesus, Christopher, I'm only giving you one job. Can't you be at least a little helpful?" "Well, I mentioned it to Zach Darwin," I said. She looked at me with admiration. "See, I knew you were on point, Christopher. That's a great job. You think of everything." "I probably would have made a move on him first." "Thanks, babe." I shrugged. "Everyone does the best they can. Do you have plans for tomorrow?" "Yeah, you too," she said. "We're going to church, and then Mom and Dad are taking us out to eat." That sounded good. Then I thought it over. Will Brittany be there? Brittany is her twin sister. I hated her. I mean, I loved her, but she was always up to something. Usually she was up to some prank to play on her unsuspecting brother-in-law. "Of course," Susan said. "There's no way she'd miss it." I groaned and Susan laughed. "Don't worry, kid. I won't let her eat you." The church was really nice. The pastor talked about love, and I felt very loved as we were dismissed. I walked the family to the car. Leo, Susan's dad, gave the driver directions, and off we went. It was a great restaurant, and I had a wonderful time. Susan and Brittany excused themselves to the restroom, and I chatted with their parents. Stacy, their mother, was a slightly older version of their daughters, and I loved her like my own mother. Susan came back on her own and pulled herself closer to me. I felt her hand on my thigh, and it was clear that she was feeling aroused. Her hand slowly slid upward into dangerous territory, and I frowned. She burst into laughter, and I saw the gold filling. "Leo, make Brittany back off," I said. "She's doing it again." Both parents scolded their misbehaving daughter, and the real Susan walked laughingly over to the table. I pretended to be angry, and they pretended to try to calm me down. There was a flurry of activity at work on Monday. We were gearing up for the holiday season, and Burton and I had a lot of paperwork to sign. I flipped through the lease agreement, partnership documents, and everything was ready to go. I was ushered into my new corner office, overlooking the city, and settled in. I mentioned my interest in the lovely Mrs. Thomas, and Burton assured me that he would introduce me to her at the party. "Just say the word, and she's yours for the night," he promised. "Not only is she very beautiful, but she has a great sense of humor," Burton added. We had Tuesday off, and on Wednesday, we had our Christmas party. We also had Thursday and Friday off. On Tuesday, I spent a great time with Susan. She was getting everything ready for the big party, and I was already looking forward to meeting Mrs. Thomas. I casually mentioned it to Susan a couple times, and I saw her tense up, but didn't say anything. I guess she didn't mind, right? Turns out the party was held right in the Dover building. Susan had mentioned it, but I had somehow missed that information. On Tuesday, we decided to spend the evening in our new apartment to sort of dedicate it, but the bed turned out to be creaky, which required an immediate solution. No one likes squeaky beds. It occurred to me that Armor All might help, so I decided to splurge on it. That tedious creaking was making some pretty unpleasant noises. We got our party clothes ready and hung them in the closet. All day, I had been waiting for this moment, and when Susan finally came out, I was amazed at her appearance. Her red dress perfectly emphasized her beauty, and she looked gorgeous. I tried to move closer to her, but she pulled away, saying I was wrinkling her. "Later, big boy," she said. "It was a little disappointing, but we'll get over it when we get to that bridge. Hopefully it won't collapse. Bridges somehow tend to act like that." Gave me a closer look. I felt pretty stylish in my tuxedo, and she seemed to approve, running her hand down my pants. "Keep your cool," she warned me. I hoped Mrs. Thomas would help me with that. When we entered the party, there was jazz music playing. Food and drinks were presented in abundance, and several couples were already dancing. Susan always insists that we arrive a little late to the celebrations. I'm sure almost every male eye in the room was fixed on her when we entered, and probably many female ones too. As soon as we entered, Burton personally escorted us to the main table, where all the senior partners were already seated, as well as a few of the junior partners. I introduced Susan and we took our seats. Zach Darwin took Susan under his wing and led her away to the food tables, and Burton introduced Mrs. Thomas to me for introductions. She looked even more attractive in person. Her name was Christina, but she suggested I just call her Christy. She snuggled up to me like it was a natural fit. We walked over to a table with appetizers and drinks. When we returned to the table, Burton and Darwin surrounded Susan, flattering her with compliments. I noticed her eyelid flutter slightly when her gaze met mine. It was almost like a wink to me. As Christy snuggled up to me and the gourmet food on my plate, I felt as happy as a child in a toy store. As we drank, the conversations became more and more candid. I heard a few phrases from Burton and Darwin addressed to Susan. "I can't wait to get you into bed and spend the whole night with you already," one of them said. Susan just giggled. "You won't be able to say no," added the other. "Sometimes we have clients who come to us who really know their way around love. You'll be screaming with pleasure all night long," continued the third. "Oh, I'll be satisfied by all means," Susan murmured, sounding a little vague. "I think I'm going to show you something you didn't even realize you had." I was a little confused by all of this. Maybe the pictures I was about to get would help me figure out what was going on. Hopefully the creak in the bed had been fixed by now, and the sound quality wouldn't let me down. Burton looked at me. "We're taking this hot girl to your house," he announced. "You won't recognize her after we're done." The senior partners led the clearly unhinged Susan out of the room. They headed for the elevator, while Brittany and my father-in-law headed home. I patted Christy on the shoulder. "The show's starting," I said. She laughed. Her laugh was really cute. "Let's get started," she replied. We took the elevator to the top floor. Several other people joined us. They looked good in their uniforms. I thought they might have been airline pilots, but I had never seen armed pilots before. When I opened the door, I was greeted inside by 7 very surprised faces and 1 angry face. "Christopher," Burton said, "what are you doing here?" The uniformed men approached me, handcuffs in hand, and began explaining my rights, including the right to an attorney and the right to remain silent. I looked at Susan. She was dressed only in a beautiful red lace garter and stockings. It appeared that the dress painted on her turned out not to be real. She silently threw on a robe. "What's going on here?" Darwin demanded. "Who are you people?" "We're the owners of this apartment." "Why are you arresting us? Why the fuck would you do that?" "Multiple charges," Burton replied. "Tax fraud, sexual harassment, making illegal videos, breach of privacy, that sort of thing. Maybe we'll come up with something else?" I looked at Burton. "Damn it, Burton," I said. "I told you this collection of mattress tags would get you in trouble sooner or later. I thought Darwin was about to lose control completely." His gaze shifted from Susan to Brittany. "Who the hell are you people?" He finally growled. "I'm Deputy Federal Prosecutor Brittany Olson," she stated, pointing at her father. "This is Federal Prosecutor Leonard Olson of Sunimu." She pointed to Susan and then to me. "This is Assistant Federal Prosecutor Susan, and this is Special Investigator Christopher, her husband." Nis, you see, Nuryad, given all the evidence we've gathered with the wires Christopher is wearing, you don't stand a chance. We've been working on this for the last 18 months, and you're under arrest, you bastard. They were let out of the apartment, leaving the four of us, me, Susan, Brittany, and Christy. You're still going to testify against them, right, Christy? Susan asked. Of course, Christy replied with a smile on her face. I coughed. So Christy won't be joining us at the party? I asked, and Brittany can stay if she wants. Both women seemed to be in complete agreement with my suggestion. I could see the glint in their eyes. Who are you calling a goober? Protested Brittany. Besides, it's my apartment. You just subbled it to me yesterday. I'm the one kicking you out. Go home and sleep in your own bed. In that damn Millennium Tower you're so proud of. Christy, Christopher, you two can stay if you want. I was willing, but I preferred to stay with Susan. Forget about them, she said. My man is going to enjoy himself tonight. All this excitement is making me horny myself. Are you going to turn me into a slut tonight? She unfastened her robe as the elevator door closed. You want a private slut? I glared at her. Maybe later, babe, but I'm tired of all this tonight. I just want to take my beautiful wife home and show her how much I love her. I feel dirty for being around these guys for 18 months. Do you understand, baby? Can we just enjoy our lovemaking tonight? She agreed, and we had a wonderful evening together. S.